Welcome. My name is Mike Gordon, and we're here today to talk with a couple of explorers. Two gentlemen who have an avocation of finding rare species, and they've recently done a expedition up to a lake in Canada called the Okanagan Lake in search of one of the best known and most noted rare creatures called Ogopogo. Its history goes back to the 1800s, and these gentlemen have recently gone there. I'd like to introduce Mr. Peter Beach and Mr. Wayne Hall. Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you even got started in this kind of thing, and what got you up to Canada.
Well, this all began with a friend of mine, Milt Marcy, an author, and he asked me to go to Africa. Since then, we've been to Africa and Papua New Guinea and Canada many times, and many places in the United States. I started in going to Canada about 16 years ago. And Philip O'Donnell, another researcher that I've worked with, it was his bright idea. He was a very young kid at the time. And he got a boat and he got us set up, and I couldn't pass it up. It seemed like an interesting thing to do. I didn't expect to find anything, but that's how it all started.
Okay, and now Canada, Ogopogo, this is your fifth trip up there. And previously, your research amounted to standing on the shore and scanning the lake. Is that correct? How did you go about it? This time you've done something differently, but how did you do it in the past compared to what you're now? Why don't Wayne tell us?
Yeah. So the vast majority of the time we were basically on the shore, on a vantage point, looking down the lake with our cameras. And it works. It's great for a beginner and stuff like that. There's only one problem with it. If the creature doesn't come to the surface, you don't have a sighting. It doesn't care how good your camera is. It doesn't care on your ambitions. It doesn't care how much money you spent. And the vast majority of the time, we just observe the wildlife. And matter of fact, the last two expeditions before this one were complete strikeouts. We had some interesting stories to tell, but that's for another video. The fact is, we didn't have anything. So we decided to change. Otherwise, we're just getting burnt out on it.
Okay, so what'd you do this time?
Well, I thought the best shot we had would be to use a side scan sonar, which aren't cheap. And after that, there were other things that got in the way. Tell us about the fires.
Oh, yeah. Well, the last couple of years we had very bad fires. And I was leery about going on vacation again with the fires possibly being as bad as what they were before. And then our contact up there in Okanagan Lake, he told me that they have a fire up there.
Okay.
And, so that's why we went in September.
Okay.
It was after we got some of the first rains on in, and that dampened things down considerably.
Okay. So Lake Okanagan, if I understand, is a very long, narrow lake, and it's about 240 miles east of Vancouver in BC and 50, 60 miles north of the border approximately.
Yeah.
Okay. And on that lake, how long is the lake? It's
Roughly 80 miles.
80 miles long.
Yeah.
And you ended up on the south end of the lake is where you did your exploration this time because of the forest fires. Is that correct? So nature kind of dictated
A little
where
bit.
you were going to go? Okay.
It was a yes and no thing. We also had the issue with campgrounds. We needed a place where we could recharge our batteries. So we needed a place where we could plug into an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
We were actually using our own makeshift rubber raft electric motor system. And I had to be Mr. Inventor. I was Thomas Edison II or something. But anyhow, I ended up making a system where I had a motor mount, the motor that clamps onto that motor mount. Then it has brackets that reach on out into the boat and all that. So it was complex.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. Before you'd sat on the beach, you guys had watched and observed from there. Now you're in the water, so you've got a boat. How long is this boat? It's a rubber life raft.
It's basically about 10 foot.
10 feet. The two of you are in it, and you have side scan sonar. Pete, give us a brief overview of side scan sonar, what it does, and why it was something you want to have.
Sure, I can do that easier if I just show this. The side scan unit that we had was portable. The main parts of it is a monitor, which is a computer that has a screen, and it determines what the transducer, how it interprets the transducer.
Okay.
The transducer produces sound, ultrasonic sound,
Okay.
and it sends it down in a and receives on the same unit. The unit sticks in the water at the end of the boat. It's ultrasonic sound. Its frequency is too high to hear. It's about 1/2 inch wide, and it's a slice. And this thing makes slices at a very rapid rate as the boat moves.
Okay.
So the slower the boat moves, the more definition you get.
So it sends a beam of sound down, the beam bounces back, and depending on how it can make pictures out of that.
That's right.
Radar uses radio waves, sonar uses sound
That's right.
waves. Okay. So you guys have your 10-foot boat, you've got your thing all set up, and off you go onto the lake.
Right.
What happened next?
Well, we could see things in the lake. And one of the things we could see would be like a bush. There are rocks, there are valleys, and all sorts of things you'd see terrestrially. But there are also shrimp and fish in the water column.
Okay.
We noticed when we would leave in the mornings that there would be nothing in the water column. And then right about sunrise, there would be fish coming, or shrimp probably first, coming off the bottom and filling the central part of the water column.
Okay.
And that was the first revelation, is that there was something going on that we hadn't anticipated. We know that fishermen like the mornings and they like the evenings. That's the best time when the fish are feeding. Well, that would kind of explain what's going on.
Sure.
And but we were seeing things like this, and I thought it was probably this, because it just didn't have any limbs. But then I started seeing more of them, and as I looked at them, they looked to be a lot larger than they should be if they were old trees that have disintegrated or something. So at one point, I said to Wayne, "Hey, turn around on this one." When you turn around with a sonar, you'll get these lines right here. Now those lines just indicate that we've turned.
Good.
And it's a good indicator in terms of at what point we turned. We were moving at roughly 1 to 2 miles an hour in that range. And what happens is this goes this way. So the picture is taken as it's being sliced and we're moving forward. It's scrolling back like this. So this is the first thing that we would see. This is the second thing we would see. This is the third thing we would see. And this would be the fourth thing that we saw. And what happened was, the first time I saw one of these that we turned around, when I went back, you can see where we turned, I saw this, which means it's the second thing that happened. I looked there, a minute or two later, it was like this. So the thing was no longer in the ground, it was up in the column, water column. And you can notice over here on the right, this is a good indicator of how long things are. So you can tell that this is something in the range of 10 feet long. This might have been 6 feet long. That seemed to be awfully large without any limbs. That's why we went back and looked again, and it was up in the water column. It was long, stringy, looked like a tube. You could see a certain amount of waviness to it, like it was animate. So then I said, oh, turn around again. And then we saw this. The third thing was this, which I call a beehive. It seemed to have a texture to it, as if it was tubes that were wound around one another, sort of like this. The next thing, I said, turn around. So we turned around, and that thing had become much smaller. But another thing I noticed was that there was debris up in the water column that was obviously coming from the same object. And so there was like 30 feet of dirt and debris and clay and sand being thrown up into the water column. Though then I went back and looked at it before, the before image, and it was smaller, but you could definitely see there was something going on. There was like digging or thrashing around in the mud and the sand. Also, I wanted to show that not only do we have, this is a down scan, this is a side scan. So we can see the same object from two different angles.
Mm-hmm.
So this angle, this is 90 degrees to that angle. And then the second picture, this picture, we could see it up in the water column from another direction, 90 degrees different. And then the third one, we could see it this way, the same object. And then we saw the fourth thing. So it wasn't just some figment of our imagination or some oddball quirk that was here. It was also here, which means what we see on the screen is an actual hard object. You can tell the difference between a soft object and a hard object by the density of the color.
Mm-hmm.
You can also tell how deep we were. So in this case, we were at around 40 feet when we made our discovery. This is how fast we were moving, somewhere between 1 and 2 miles an hour. We have the water temperature at the transducer level, the time of day. This again is a side scan. This has a scrolling action down, but it's much shorter than this. So what is this is this. So what passes down here, we lose. We don't see this anymore. We see the next object here, which is this object here. But not fortunately with the down scan, we have a lot more chance to get as many of these extra views. We lose the first view of this. This is now lost over here, but we now have the fourth view here. Now we had a fifth view, which was basically just this. It was just flat ground. Mm-hmm. So wherever this went, it went down, I think. Quite obviously, it was throwing up all this debris. This animal then was somewhere at 10 feet long here. Something, this same object, seen 90-degree angle, was roughly 10 feet or a little less. These are the actual sit-down scans and side scans of different observation that we had. There's a small mark here that would have been right about here, so we lost this one. But again, it was a oddball looking thing. This is soft mud. You can see by the difference in color. The yellow, the hard yellow, solid yellow is harder than the soft redder area. Here's a separate place. We have objects like this and like this. You can see fish in the water column. We had this object right here. Can't explain that one. This little dot was connected to this. Something that was I don't know, perhaps it's an object, a living object, perhaps it's not. We don't know. This is another side scan, deeper, and there was an object that was coming off the bottom that was also roughly 10 feet tall, something like that. Now, the object here that we saw in the water column here and here, if you take those two views, 90 degrees, and you put them tail to head, and draw a line, the math shows you that the animal is something like 16 feet. We think it's an animal because it came out and then went back, so it's animate, and it's an unknown animal. The math is correct. 16 feet is much larger than anything that should be in the lake, that is known to be in the lake.
And because it was moving, you know it's an animal of some sort.
That's correct.
So what do you think it is? Do you think it's Ogopogo?
I think that's a good speculation. We don't know that for certain. We had some sonar hits, and those sonar hits changed as we went back over it, back and forth. If it was a log, it was stayed there. That's the fact. That's the facts, okay? What we do know as a fact is that it changed each time we took a pass. So,
and on the last day, we found this object. This object here is roughly 10 feet tall and maybe 6 feet wide, and seemed to be something like this. You see how it's at an angle? So if it was digging in, or if it was doing what it did on the first scan that we're talking about, like this, it's just on its side. It's the same as this, only on its side. Now when I saw that, I said go back around, and when we went back around, we went right over the bubbles, and it wasn't but a minute later, and it was gone.
oh, yeah, we also have a method of tracking to make sure that we go back over to the same spot, that we just don't stray all over the place. And the motor is like a 50 pounds of thrust, and it does leave like a little trail of bubbles. It's nothing big like a big gigantic 10 horsepower outboard motor, but it does leave a telltale trace of where you've been. So tracking and backtracking is pretty easy to do. And by the way, I'd like to explain that the reason why we have illustrations here and pictures here is because we didn't get the pictures on camera, because there was a learning curve. He thought he was recording and he wasn't.
Okay.
We discovered it after the fact.
Yeah, I thought I was recording this. I was actually recording our place on a map.
Okay.
And it was like putting a pin on the map. This is, we're here, we're here, we're here. It's not the picture that we wanted. So as soon as we got off the boat and I realized, I went back and I could see that we had all these pins. By the way, I know how to do it correctly now. I didn't have it set up right. I'm not an expert in sonar. At any rate, so what I did is I drew pictures of what I'd seen. He saw this one, and he saw this one. He saw this one, but he didn't see this one or this one. So you're going to have to take my word for that, what these look like.
Yeah, well, he did show me some, but mind you, the reason why I was kind of like in the dark on some stuff, because I was focused upon monitoring the boat.
Sure.
The boat was like my responsibility, and we found out that this is a two-man operation, and it takes just about 90% of our energy and effort. At some point, 100%. When you have the waves moving, and I'm trying to stay on a particular course, those waves just want to buffet you around and turn you about and all that, and it can be tiring.
Now, is this one day's worth of information, or is this, how many days were you there?
Well, we were there about 6 days, but that took us about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that was one particular day.
In the 6 days, was this the only day you saw these?
That's the only day we saw all four of these.
So the other 5 days, if you went over the same spot, those were gone.
We get a lot of these things coming out. I saw this more than once. I probably saw 4 or 5 of these. I mean, they're smaller. But this is a big one. This is about twice as big as the one that we're showing here.
Okay, Pete, you say that you can tell density by color. Does
Mhm.
this look solid, or does it
Yes.
look like just a plume of
That's
mud?
quite solid. It would be nice if I had done it quicker, but this edge right here isn't the edge. That's just a photograph. So it's really more like here. So what I did is I missed this. This is probably right about here now if it was scrolling down. That would be the side scan. The down scan I do have, but I saw it, but I couldn't believe it. That's when I showed him this and then took a picture. We were actually using a camera to take pictures of the screen.
Yeah, and sometimes he's off on his positioning,
Mhm.
and that's one of the times, but we got some information off of it.
So do you feel like your side scan sonar is a tool that is going to help you in the future? And what is the future? Are you going back?
Oh, hopefully. I think the side scan sonar is more productive than sitting on the lake shore waiting for Ogopogo to come up and say hi. So I have an underwater camera system that can go down 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my correspondents up there has the camera because before when we were using it, it was like stabbing in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Because the underwater camera's visibility range is restricted to the water clarity. Now things are different. This technology is a game changer. We have a hit, we go over that hit, lower down the camera, and see what's there. It doesn't mean that we'll have success. You have to have the sonar in order to make the underwater camera worthwhile.
Know where to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mm-hmm. So you guys gone up there, spent 6 days in Canada. You went around the lake, saw all these things. What do you think this thing looks like?
Well, this is what I think we're looking at. I think we're looking at something that's eel-like. May not be an eel, it may be an amphibian. We don't know. But I think what we're seeing is on the first screen, we're actually seeing an animal about half out of a hole. And it's normally in its hole before we see anything. So we're going to see flat plain most of the time when these animals are around.
Mm-hmm.
When it's going down into the ground here, here, I think we're getting something like this, where they're winding themselves up and then sticking their tail in the hole. I think they have a hole. There are eels that do this.
Okay.
So this is not something that I'm
making up. Okay.
up. So they're animals, the eels specifically, will stick their tail in here. There's usually some goo or some slippery material that they use to kind of pad their place. Then they move when it gets smaller. They're down in, and then finally they're completely in the hole. Then they come up when they're ready to feed.
Interesting. And so what's next? You guys have gone, you've seen there's something there. You're going to do more equipment, bigger sonar. What are you going to do next?
Well, our sonar's fine. I think that our method is sound. I think what we need is a better brain. We need to be a little faster on what's happening and understanding what's happening. I think we are now. We're able to use the equipment better. We understand the equipment. Before, there was a steep learning curve. Talk about the learning curve.
Yeah.
Just communication was we were talking to one another at opposite ends sometimes. We were not conflicting, but we just didn't know what we were doing. We're learning how to do this. And I think we did. Don't you think, Wayne?
Yeah. Well, also we learned about what places perhaps we should go and places that's a waste of time. Well, I remember that one part we decided, well, let's go and visit Rattlesnake Island again. And my humble opinion, looking back, was that was a waste of time in a sense, in terms of research. But we did learn that it's not very worthwhile to go there with underwater cameras. Because what do we see? Geography.
Yeah.
Underwater geography.
Hard rocks mostly.
Yeah. Any fish?
Not much.
So we are now theorizing. Grant, this is theorizing like a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
We can't prove this, but we think some of these areas where Ogopogo has been seen a lot is mainly because it's maybe relocating from one end of the lake to another. And at that part, it's just up on the water because it's
Transiting.
Yeah, transiting, go on. And it could be that maybe it needs a little bit of vitamin D from the sun, perhaps. Maybe a small amount, maybe it's getting that in. We don't know. I'm just speculating right now.
Okay, so you're running the boat. You're running. Why don't you put a fishing pole over? You know where you saw the bumps. Could you run a lure down there, see if you could catch one of those things?
We're thinking of it.
No, maybe not. There's other stuff that you don't want to get in trouble with the authorities on. So
Yeah, we want to make sure that what we do is legal, what we do is ethical,
Okay.
and that's important to us. We have reputations that we want to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be seen as breaking the law, so we'll do whatever is necessary. But we do think we have a really good shot next year of getting a picture of the thing, at least.
there's another thing that we got out of this expedition that's very positive. In the past, we were more discreet. We didn't really broadcast ourselves. And when we went to different spots to do our onshore observation, there were some folks who were maybe thinking that we're perhaps squatters or something. This time, we decided to do something different. That is actually go brandishing our logo of Animal Discovery. We had it on our hats, we had it on our coats, and we told them that's who we're part of. We were a whole lot more open about that than what was before, and it worked to our favor. It's like that couple that helped us with like a modification for the boat.
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie had some people talking about the sightings they had.
Helped us take pictures.
Oh, yeah, they even took pictures for us, you know, when we were setting up the boat and all that, getting it going. All that is perhaps because we were open about what group we're with, you know. So, in that extent, having a logo with your brand name on it does help. Some places it wouldn't, but our experience is quite positive.
Do you feel that the expedition was a success for what you were trying to do? And
yes.
are you going to
Yes.
You're going to go up again, I can tell just by talking to you, you're going to go back up. But are you going to go to a different part of the lake? Will you go to the north end next time, the middle? I mean, or go back into this same area where you've seen things?
So that remains to be seen.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that we could go to many places on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
I've marked out on the lake with a map where we could go and be successful. I think that there's more than one animal. I think there's many animals. Some people have speculated that there wouldn't be, for an animal that size, there wouldn't be enough, a large enough population to maintain itself. Well, what we've seen in the number of times we had hits, I'm sure that there's a population that's easily large enough to maintain itself. I think these animals live a long time. I don't think they need to breed every year. And there seems to be lots of fish for them to eat. And I think the reason people haven't found it before or landed one of these things is that they're so big. They have tackle for salmon and trout.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a sturgeon down there, but nobody's ever caught a sturgeon, by the way. There isn't anything anywhere near as big. 3-4 feet is the biggest fish they've ever seen out of that lake.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is 10 times bigger than that, and probably maybe 20 times heavier than that. So whatever they caught on if they ever caught one of these on light tackle, it's gone. The light tackle is just a lost lure, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, in conclusion, I would say we are going back, and we were as successful as I had hoped we would be, more successful than I even thought we could be, because we got so much information.
So stay tuned. Thank you for joining us.